Hey everyone, it's Chrono from the Headphone Show. Today we're going to be taking a look at a pair of wireless ANC headphones. And the reason for this is because I'll actually be traveling next week. And when on the go, or if I'm going to be in a plane, I really like using over-ear wireless ANC headphones. When it's going to be for extended periods of time, I just find over-ears to be a lot more comfortable than something like AirPods Pro, which are of course in-ear. So I had to look around online and I saw that everybody was recommending the Sony XM4 XM4. And I also see this a lot when walking around on my college campus. So naturally I had to try them, but these are not actually going to be the focus of this video, because at around the same time, Resolve reached out to me and was like, yo, have you tried out the Razer THX ANC wireless headphone? They're like half the price and they're pretty good. We also have one at the headphones.com office if you want to try it out, which was an offer I couldn't refuse. So today we're going to be checking out the Razer Opus. Okay, so Razer is best known for their PC gaming peripherals, and this ranges anywhere from, classic headsets like the Kraken to highly competitive FPS gaming mice like the Viper Ultimate. However, they do have a few products that, even though they're still very much rooted in their gaming tech background, I think that they blend more into what could be described as being lifestyle products. So they have things like backpacks, fashion company collaborations, gamer chewing gum, masks. But more interesting for us here on the Headphone Show, they have some non-gaming oriented headsets, both in-ear and over-ear, like the Opus here, which retails for $199.99. And as we'll see briefly, this is a headphone that is almost completely devoid of things like the gamer aesthetic or gaming headset features, and it's more akin to something like the Sony XM4, like the Momentum 3 wireless from Sennheiser or the Bose Quiet Comfort. Taking a look at features first, the Opus has quite a bit going on for it. For starters, there is of course the fact that it is a Bluetooth enabled device, so you compare it with PCs, smartphones, tablets, and you get wireless audio. It's not latency free like what you get on the less expensive and mobile gaming oriented Opus X, but audio playback still feels very responsive, and I haven't experienced any audio dropouts or stutters, so it's a solid connection. Of note though, there is a very noticeable noise floor or light background hiss on the Opus that might be distracting when listening to quiet passages in songs. Then there's the hybrid noise cancellation, which uses internal and external microphones on the headphone to rather effectively reduce ambient noise. I was actually quite surprised by how well the Opus performed in this regard. It outperformed my Momentum 3s, and it got really close to the kind of noise cancelling you get on the XM4s, which is the best I've heard thus far. So for nearly half the price, it's pretty impressive. The one thing I'll point out here is that unfortunately, in my experience, it would seem as though enabling the surround sound does change the frequency response and tonality of the headphone quite a bit, but I'll talk more about that later. You also get support for the Opus on the Razer Audio mobile app, although the additional features you get from this are actually quite limited and disappointing, as you only really get a readout of the headphone's battery level, which, by the way, lasts an impressive 40 hours with ANC off and 30 with ANC on, as well as some EQ presets that I honestly did not find to be as good as the default THX one. The one feature I really feel like they missed out on the mobile app, the mobile Razer Audio app, is the ability to make custom EQ profiles for the Opus. And I find the absence of this feature really odd, because it's actually available for a few of the other Razer headphones that are supported by the app. It's just simply not enabled for the Opus. So I hope that this is something we see changed in either a firmware or a software update in the future for the Opus. On the headphone itself, you do get some built-in controls on the rear side of both ear cups. The left ear cup hosts the power button, which doubles up as the Bluetooth pairing button, as well as the ANC toggle. Unfortunately, you don't get a blended environment feature like you get on the Sony XM4 or Momentum 3, but there is an ambience feature you get when the ANC button is held down that enhances your awareness by muting device audio and boosting outside noises, so could be handy when exercising outdoors. On the right side, you get standard media controls such as a playback button for pausing, playing, rewinding, or fast forwarding music, as well as volume up and volume down controls. So like most modern wireless headphones, the Opus has an auto start and stop feature. So, if you have the headphones on and you take them off, it pauses the music, you put them back on, it resumes playing, which is very handy for when like somebody comes up and to talk to you, so you can just start chatting. There is one thing I will critique though, and that is that it has sound prompts for certain commands, like for the ANC toggle, but they're not exactly the clearest. I feel like this headset would have really benefited from having like spoken voice prompts. So, having the headset tell you like, oh, active noise canceling on or off. Because sometimes the sounds, you can't really tell how the status has changed. So I feel like that was a little bit of an oversight, and I would hope that they change that for future versions or whatever follows the Opus. Lastly, there's the THX certification. Now, THX certification refers to industry standards set for immersive and accurate audio reproduction. It's something we see a lot in theaters, speakers, etc. But I'm gonna be completely honest, in my experience, I don't feel like the THX certification really does anything for the Opus. It just seems like, it just sounds like choosing another EQ preset. It just so happens that it's the best EQ preset available, but I mean, it sounds like a headphone, and it's a headphone, but it's a certified headphone, so that's great, I guess. Okay, so there was a lot to cover for features, but let's now talk about the build, which I actually quite like. Of course, like most headphones in this price bracket and of this style, it's built primarily out of plastic, but it feels quite solid and well put together, with smooth motion on all the moving parts and no creaking that I could hear. Additionally, the design is foldable and collapsible, allowing them to fit inside the low-profile case and making them ideal for travel. Next to the XM4, you'll see that the Opus has a very similar structure to the Sony's, although the ear cups are not as round and are a little smaller, so not quite as comfortable. For me personally, they were pretty easy to wear even for extended periods of time, but I will warn that I think that these could actually fit as on-ears for users with larger ears, since the opening on the ear pads is quite narrow, and the pads aren't very deep, so your ears might come in contact with the driver as well. Definitely something to keep in mind if you're sensitive to that type of stuff. But let's now talk about what the most important thing is and what I loved most about the Opus, and that is its sound, because it actually has one of the best stock tunings and tonalities that I've heard in an ANC headphone, even if it doesn't get too loud when used in wireless mode. See, when compared to the XM4, which has a very aggressive bass tuning, and it also has like scooped mids, the Opus actually feels quite balanced. And even though I feel like it could use a little bit more brilliance in the treble region, at least for me personally, I think it's a very safe tuning, and one that I think many users will find very enjoyable. The bass is nowhere near as pronounced as on the XM4, but it still has a fairly generous bass shelf that keeps the lower registers present. To my surprise, it doesn't have much roll off in the sub bass, with only the frequencies under 30 Hz starting to lose a bit of energy, so you do get a good level of depth behind bass tones. It's also worth pointing out that unlike the XM4 and unlike Razer's other headsets, the gaming ones, you don't get an exaggerated bloated sounding mid bass. It's even pretty much throughout, and it cleanly transitions into a mid-range with no upper bass bleed, which was one of the biggest problems I had with the XM4. Now, speaking of the mids, it's no Sennheiser mid-range, but I do really like the mid-range voicing of the Opus. The lower mids between 300 to 1000 Hz are quite rich, and the upper mid-range between 2 to 5K provides suitable contouring. All instruments and vocals feel like they have a robust body, and they also have their embellishing overtones well represented. Then there's the treble, and just a few moments ago I mentioned that this is a warm sounding headphone. This is because even though it has a very present mid and upper mid-range, the treble does sort of roll off a bit, particularly in the lower treble region between 5 to 6.5K, where the Opus seems to dip a little. In my experience, this mainly affected instruments like drums and cymbals, as they didn't have as pronounced of an attack and strike as I would have expected, but also vocals felt like they were missing a little bit of their brilliance. For treble-averse listeners, I think that this tuning will sound rather lovely, but for me, it could have used a little more energy in this region of the frequency response and could have benefited from EQ being available on the app. Overall though, I really like this tuning that the Opus has. It's quite laid back and easygoing. It's a good listen. As for technical performance, there isn't really much for me to say here. The soundstage on the Opus is quite narrow, and it actually is quite a bit more intimate than what you get on the XM4. And it's also not as detailed. There is like some haziness in the mid-range as well as in the low treble, even though the Opus has a much more natural sounding frequency response. And just for comparisons, I feel like in both regards, in terms of soundstage, detail retrieval, layering, imaging, both the Opus and the XM4 are outperformed by the Sennheiser Momentum 3, but I guess it's not that surprising since that one is the most expensive ANC headphone that I've tried. One last thing I wanted to draw attention to is that something that I noticed in my time with the Opus is that, at least in my experience, I did notice a significant tonal change when turning on ANC. It heavily boosted the bass in a manner similar to the XM4, and it also scooped out quite a bit of the mids and the highs, so I ended up preferring the headphone with ANC off. Although this wasn't too big a deal for me since the passive noise isolation it provides is excellent. I haven't seen other users experiencing this change, so I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but I thought I should mention it anyways. Okay, so now to wrap up this video on the Opus. At the time of making this video, I noticed that it was on sale on Razer's website for like $139.99, and at that price tag, I'm inclined to say that it's one of the best deals available right now for the lifestyle/wireless headphone market. Now, I've never really been a big fan of Razer's headphones because I've always found their tunings to be very aggressive or skewed in an awkward way, but in the case of the Opus, I feel like they got it just right. The tuning here is really enjoyable. Of course, the form factor and wireless functionality make these ideal for on-the-go use or when traveling, and for the price tag, you actually get a pretty good build and a pair of headphones that is very comfortable if you don't have like super large ears. Its feature set may not be as rich or as fully developed as that of the XM4, and some users might find that the noise floor is really distracting, but for me personally, the Opus just made for a much more enjoyable listening experience, and I don't feel like I'm missing anything that would make me want to double my budget to reach for that XM4. Don't be fooled by its price tag. It's actually quite competitive and definitely worth some consideration if you're looking for a solid set of wireless over-ear headphones. Anyways, that is all for me today. I hope you enjoyed this video or found it useful. If you did, do consider dropping a like. If you'd like to learn more about the Opus or many other headphones, I highly encourage you to check out the review section and the forum available on headphones.com. For more headphone audio content, stay tuned by subscribing to The Headphone Show here on YouTube. And until next time, this is Corona signing off.